Hey everybody, welcome to the Ronline Report. Joining us today is someone I've wanted to get on the show for a while. Very happy to have him here today. Prep coach, bodybuilder, Matt Jansen. Matt, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Ron. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. So I always like to start with the very raw background on people. And I don't know much about your early background. I want to know how you got interested in all of this, bodybuilding, how you got started as a bodybuilder, became one of us.
Yeah, it's kind of always been something that I've always been just drawn to, and just very, very much interested in muscle and how to gain muscle. And from a very early age, my dad lifted. We watched Rocky together, and that was kind of, I think, a start that a lot of guys have. We had a pretty cool York barbell gym, some gym equipment in our basement. It was all plate loaded stuff, so it wasn't like it was pretty legit equipment at the time, when I was like from 5th grade up. So that was kind of my initial start. And even my mom told stories about, when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, she would go into CVS or Walgreens, and I would always go grab a Flex magazine, and that was kind of like, when Ronnie and Jay were on the cover. So that was kind of my initial start, and I've always been an athlete, and I've always wanted to try to find ways to have better performance. So I initially, I was a soccer player growing up, and that was my training was more centered around sports specific stuff for soccer. And then in my off season, I would kind of, transition into bodybuilding, quote unquote. But I was always, my goal initially was to play soccer in college, take that as far as I could. And I got injured. I did make it to the college level. I got injured my freshman year playing college ball. I had several concussions that year. So my time at that point, being that I was still on the team, I had to delegate my time into the gym versus being on the field because I couldn't have any contact. So that was when I really started to kind of really fall in love with bodybuilding, because I knew that probably my soccer career was towards the end due to the concussions that I had. And I was also in school for exercise science. That was what my degree was in. And again, initially, I wanted to go to more of the sports side of coaching, but the more I got into bodybuilding and the more that I learned about bodybuilding, I was just very, very attracted to it. And the fact, too, that just like as in bodybuilding, from a bodybuilder's perspective, it's all kind of up to you. The same thing applies from a coaching aspect. So my success or my failures are really ultimately up to me. I'm not depending on somebody to hire me or somebody to, like in a sports realm, because I initially wanted to go into either collegiate or professional sports. But that I really learned that was more about what coaches you knew, who you're connected with, that kind of thing. So I just kind of wanted to make my own way and pave my own way, and this is how we got to where we're at.
Okay. So, usually guys get into coach. There's plenty of bodybuilders who have gone on to coaching, but they typically do it later on after they've sort of already done everything they want to do as a bodybuilder. You're kind of unusual in that, you're still doing it at the same time. You got into coaching fairly early on in the game. How did you first start working with athletes?
And kind of backtrack a little bit too. I knew that from I was in love with the sport, and I was in love with something that I didn't think that I was going to be able to attain myself due to, I was small, like I was really small. So because of that, I thought that, I saw other kids my age that I would train with and I would work harder than, or I would outlift, but yet they were twice the size of me or way more developed at the same age. So like, I kind of just like, from an earlier on age, I was like, okay, maybe this might not be for me in terms of me being a bodybuilder, but maybe I can help these people that have the genetic gifts to get to where they want to be or to get to the top. And that's kind of always been my driving force, is just to be able to help people that have what it takes to get to where they want to go. So I competed for the first time in 2010.
Yeah.
That was my first show, and I got in really, really good shape for that show. And at that point, for sake of conversation, I worked with 2 coaches for that show.
Okay.
Basically, and I found out after the fact, but I worked with one coach, and then that coach kind of handed me off to somebody else to have peak me. And the person who, quote unquote, peaked me for that show is Jason Theobald.
Okay.
So that was, I got in very good shape, and that was kind of known around my area, in an area where there wasn't very many coaches that I figured out how to get in really good shape. So at that point, and I always give credit here, my initial foundation of athletes was 3 athletes. One is now an IFBB pro in figure, one's an IFPA natural pro, and then the other one is Lloyd Herford, who the listeners or you might know, who's a national level guy. So my initial foundation and my initial client base was very, very strong in terms of athletes, in terms of genetic potential, and obviously 2 of them are professionals. So that was like, I didn't start with scrubs, and I think that, honestly, I think that helped me because I was given very, very good talent, and then I was able to make that talent better. So it kind of just caught on from there. And that's how I got into it. So, and I've always loved to train, and my thing too, like, Neil Hill is somebody that I've always looked up to and admired, and we have a very, very close friendship, but I watched how he trained with flex all the time, and that's what I wanted to do. So whether or not I was ever going to be a competitive bodybuilder competitively, like actually be competitive against others, I wanted to be able to drive those people in the gym and find ways to push them, and that's what kept me training for a long time, was just to find ways to be around guys to help make them better. And then obviously over time I've been able to develop myself as well. So that's kind of why I'm doing a dual role here. But, honestly, it's all about the people that I coach first and foremost. So even when I try to pick shows, like, I don't know if I'll ever do nationals, just because it's in November. So my most busiest time of the year is from August through the Olympia, through the post-Olympia shows. So I don't want to be in a spot where I'm having to be selfish and not be there for my Olympia athletes mentally, physically, because of the fact that I'm competing. So when it comes to me doing national shows, I'm probably going to cut it off at North Americans. That way I can be there for my people who are doing nationals. I'm sorry, the Olympia.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I do know some guys who are pros or national level bodybuilders themselves who are coaches, and I often wonder if they're able to give 100% attention to their clients when they're prepping themselves. From your experience, how difficult is that?
Okay, so for me, I think in a way it's kind of easier. Like, whenever I'm in prep, I think my day is very much more fluidly ran, because I simply, like, I have to be on top of every task. And it also, from a prep perspective, if I can have my focus on other people, like, it keeps the focus off of me overthinking things for myself. So I kind of just do what I need to do, keep the focus on them, and it works very well for me. But that being said, when it comes to that Olympia week, things kind of change, because for the week of the Olympia, I might not sleep all week. If an athlete needs me to look at them, I can't be on the treadmill doing cardio and be like, hey, I'll be there in an hour. So, like, from that kind of perspective, I think that week, and not to say I'll never do nationals, but, like, if I do nationals, I need to be way ahead the week of the Olympia, so that way if things don't go right or I can't be on track of everything, like, it doesn't set me back.
Right. At the same time, you don't need to do nationals. I mean, there is USA every July.
Right, absolutely.
There's North American every August, so
yeah,
there's plenty of chances for us Americans. Thank goodness.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about selecting clients. I'm sure you get tons of people coming to you, and some of them have genetically what it takes to be really good or champion, and a lot of them just don't. A run-of-the-mill coach would just take everybody and say, yeah, I'll take you on, and this and that. Are you very selective, and you tell these people up front, I don't think you have the structure, or it's not a realistic goal for you to turn pro, and I don't think I can help you?
No, I don't ever tell somebody that. Now, okay, this is a great question. I do like to really coach people from a perspective that I like to be actively involved in the show selection process that they have. So when somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to do X show, I'm going to kind of look at all the variables there and be like, okay, that might not be the best show for you, or that might be the best show for you. And something else too, when it comes to a national show and somebody wants to do a national show, I really only try to take people into a national show if I'm pretty confident they're going to be top 5 to top 10, and I can almost promise them that. Not that I promise them that, but, like, knowing from where they're at versus relative to where other people are, that's what I try to do. So that usually means that they're coming in off of an overall win or a few overall wins. I never try to take somebody into a national show that's definitely not won a show, especially, at least their class. So that's, when it comes to somebody, I don't ever discount or discredit genetics from the start, because I don't know what they've done previously. I don't know how hard they've worked. And, through an email, through somebody sending me pictures in an email, I can't really kind of quantify their work ethic, right off the start. But what I can do, and this is kind of how I like to select people, is I like to select people based off of the amount of effort that somebody puts into a contact email to me. So it goes a long way if they send me pictures without me asking. It goes a long way if they actually tell me what their diet's been like, what their competition history has been like, versus, hey, bro, what do you charge? That's kind of like the point of like, okay, this person's serious or this person is just, shopping around. So I don't ever turn anybody down based off of where they're at in terms of their own development. Now, obviously, I can't work with everybody, but it's more so about who I think is going to be a good fit. What kind of initial impact they have on me in terms of what they do with their email and things like that. So that's kind of how I choose somebody. But I will tell somebody straight up, hey, you're not ready for this level show. I'm not saying you're never going to be ready, but right now, like, we need to keep working, because I think a national level show is a very, very expensive, learning opportunity for something that most people already know. Most people know when they go to a national show whether or not they're going to do well. And those people that don't do well, I'm pretty sure if they would have been honest with themselves prior to that prep, they would have already known that they weren't going to do well.
Yeah.
So,
do you see? You could have a better idea of this than I could. I see so many people, I think, these days are jumping the gun on national level shows. I see people that they just took third or fourth at a local show, and immediately all they're posting on Instagram is going pro, and I'm headed to the nationals. Do you think there's a more of an impatience these days with people to hurry up and try to turn pro versus years ago when they would take their time a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, the whole generation and nature of things due to social media has changed. Everything on social media is just like a highlight reel now. And people want things like immediately. So it's definitely changed. Now, even in the past, like, guys that I work with now that have kind of been brought up and developed in terms of like what real bodybuilding is about, they're so much more patient than newer, younger guys that I get. They get the process, and even like I'll talk about like a few different guys, like Justin Compton for one, and Cade Zook as another one. These guys that are like older and they were kind of nurtured underneath older bodybuilders. Their whole thought process is different versus some guy that got into bodybuilding because they saw so-and-so on Instagram, and they think it's just like they're next in line. Even when it comes to classic physique, like I like classic physique. I think the division is good.
Yeah.
But for two things, it does create a faster road for some people, and then for other people, I think a lot of people are jumping into classic physique thinking it's easier when they have nothing classic about their physique.
Yes.
If it's classic physique is all about the structure that your parents gave you.
Right.
If you don't have a small waist and if you don't have a taper and you don't have wide lats, like don't spend time there. It's not for you. Like, you got to keep building and being an old school bodybuilder, because that's the only way that you're going to make it. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is I've seen a ton of guys jumping into classic because they just never had the size for bodybuilding for whatever reason, and somehow they think classic is just an outlet for smaller bodybuilders. When you're right, it's for people with very nice structure, pretty shape, and if you don't have that, forget it.
Yeah.
I want to back up and talk about when you got into coaching. You're still a very young guy. What are you, 27, 28?
28. Yeah, 28.
So I think I started hearing about you when you were about 24 or so. And I'll be honest with you, I was thinking, oh my God, a 24-year-old is coaching people. So you must have run into that a lot. Did you deal with that a lot? How did you deal with people judging you by your age?
I mean, I think it still happens, honestly, today. Based off of the athletes that I've had success. I mean, it's part of any competitive avenue that you take. I mean, whether I was in this or whether I was a football coach, and young football coaches all the time, like the coach for the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, he got ridiculed last year over and over and over, and they're having a good year this year. So, or relatively speaking, they're having a good year. But I know that there's so much that I can learn, and obviously experience is such a great teacher. So I still have tons of years. But the thing about me is that I work really hard at what I do, and I try to, and I just talked about this on another podcast I just did, but I really try to grow relationally with people. And because of my sports background, and I really look up to different coaches in sports, I try to find what makes athletes tick, because it's not the same thing for everybody. So you got to really try to find in terms of their psyche, like what makes them go, what motivates them, what drives them, how to speak to them to motivate them versus speaking to them in a way that's going to kind of pull them away from their goal. So this is kind of, I mean, I've always wanted to be a coach. This is always what I wanted to do. You know, and again, like I was extremely blessed, you know, even from my initial perspective of the clients that I had, to then I moved up to Kentucky, and shortly after I moved to Kentucky, Justin Compton and I became great friends. Who then Justin led me to Dallas, and you know, I've been very, very blessed, and I'm not going to say that I'm not. You know, but again, something else I've said a few times, as I think every good coach that you look at today that's got a resume, they've all been given their shot at some time. You know, I mean, Ronnie and Chad, like that was Chad's breakthrough. I mean, even Chad's wife. Huge genetic talent, you know. Same thing with Hani. Like, who would Hani be initially without Phil?
Right.
We don't know, you know.
Right.
Flex. I mean, Neil found Flex, and they both kind of came up together, you know. So you have these stories, and I don't think people look at that now. But like, I'm no different than them in terms of some athlete gave me a shot early on, and that's what's brought me up to this level, you know. So. I kind of welcome the criticism, you know, and it's part of being successful. It's going to happen, and I also know that, you know, it's part of me being young. Like, I'm going to get criticized for it, so it's just part of it.
Right. So, what makes somebody an ideal client, and what have you found with some people in your experience that makes a person just not coachable? So, two different.
Okay, so I could take this a few different ways, but I've worked with some older, more advanced guys that have worked with a lot of coaches, and I feel like my style of coaching was consistently being judged off of what all their other coaches did previously.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a hard relationship to get into, because I mean, it's just like any relationship, like a dating relationship. Like, if you're constantly being judged against the former spouse or whatever, like, it's going to be hard to create something new and fresh and move forward from that.
Yeah.
And it's not like even anything in the relationship was going wrong in terms of what we were doing, coach-athlete relationship. It's just like, well, why are we doing this? Because I've never done this before, even though it's working. Like, why? You know, and I love the why questions. I love to explain things. I'm not going to tell somebody to do something that I don't understand or get myself. You know, so that's kind of a hard battle that I have sometimes. People that I enjoy working with are people that just really, you know, work their tail off. And communication. I mean, it really comes down to communication and how can people communicate. And some people, even like this, like, it's not a fault against them, but some people are really introverted and they just don't talk, and that's hard. Like, it's hard to learn about an individual and how to make that individual better if they just like don't give you feedback, even when you ask for it. You know, if all you ever hear is, hey, I'm good, or hey, everything's cool, like, you're not really learning about them, you know. So that's kind of tough, and it can work, but you got to find ways to break down those walls to get that communication to where it needs to be.
So, you know, you make what you said about that is, so many people I've talked to or heard about, they go from coach to coach to coach to coach, and they'll do one show with one coach, and they don't do as well as they wanted to. They ditch that coach and move on to another one, and this happens over and over again for a process of years. You know, why do you think that's a bad idea? Do you think it's better to give what's the learning curve with an athlete? Does it take a couple shows at least?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'll give you a great example. In a positive way, Sean Clarita and I have now done 1, 2, 3. I think we've done 6 or 7 shows together, and he's literally gotten better every show. And we've taken notes from every show and applied it to the next show, and it's worked. So if I only had one shot at him, his only showing would have been New York Pro, and under our time together, rather than improving and taking those notes from each show, he would have had to restart from scratch with every new coach that he started with. You know, so yeah. I mean, if you have that person, like, it all comes down to trusting and wanting the best for each other and having each other's best interest in mind. And I think if you truly have that, like, you're going to have something special. You know, if your coach is educated and your coach truly cares about you, give that coach the benefit of the doubt. You know, I mean, I think about it all the time, but our sport is so tough, because I was actually just thinking about this yesterday. For example, in the NFL, if you have a bad game, if you have one bad showing,
Yeah.
the athlete and the coach shows up to practice on Monday, and they're encouraged and motivated to get better to not replicate that bad showing again.
Right.
Versus in bodybuilding, if you have one bad showing, that could literally be the end of your run together. Like one showing, you know?
Yeah.
And I understand there's money on the line and stuff like that, but I think it's really important if you have a bad showing as both the coach and the athlete to mutually come together and say, hey, let's take a few days, let this digest, and then let's talk about it, versus having that raw emotion come out right away. Because when there's raw emotion right after a show, a lot of things can be said that aren't meant, and that alone can divide and break up, a good, very positive thing. So it's hard. The loyalty within the physique community is very rare, and if you find it, just latch onto it and run with it, because even with me, like, I have a lot of people that I really respect, but at the end of the day, it's like all about that one showing. If that one showing is off, that could be the end of your run.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just how it is. It's just realistic.
Yeah, I mean, do you find every Monday or Sunday and Monday after a big show, Facebook and Instagram is just literally infested with guys like blaming coaches or blaming, he had me over carb or under carb, I was too flat, or do you find a lot of guys sort of try to pass the buck on to coaches when there were things that were either out of anyone's control or certainly the blame couldn't be put on the coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, okay, even again, like, Sean this weekend in Kuwait, I think, and I'm not talking bad about the production, because they do a great job over there, but I believe the show started, they got on stage 3.5 hours after they were told they were initially going to get on stage.
Yeah.
That's 3.5 hours of a lot of time where a lot of things can either go right or wrong, So if you're peaking an athlete for a show, or you want your athlete to be the best at 7 and they get on stage at 10:30, that could be a completely different physique. And especially in a situation where Sean's 7 hours ahead of me, doesn't have Wi-Fi, and is in Kuwait, what are you going to do? Like, I mean, there's really not that much you can do. So it's tough, I mean, it's honestly very, very tough. And again, that's the thing. Like, if Kuwait was Sean and I's first show together, probably wouldn't have gone very well because of all those different variables. But the fact that we had all these previous notes to look back on and say, hey, bring X, Y, and Z just in case the show runs long or whatever, we had that to draw from, So it's definitely tough. But you gotta, if you don't trust your coach and you guys don't really care about each other, it's not ever going to work as best as it can. Even if you don't show up the first time on point, like, you still got to trust that you guys have each other's back. I mean, Phil isn't always on, Ronnie wasn't always on, but those guys, Flex isn't always on, and Neil will be the first to tell you that, but they still trust in each other, and look where it's got them.
Yeah, you say it's bodybuilding does seem to be a show, even at the top amateur level, where you're only as good as your last show, where people will literally write off. Somebody can have a great run of shows, do win, or place very highly, and then bam, if they get one poor showing, boom, he sucks.
Yep.
Everyone's immediately on the bandwagon saying this guy's all done, he's all finished.
Yep.
Whereas, like you talked about football, Patriots, they have one bad game, the fans don't abandon them. It's on to the next week. Why do you think bodybuilding is so, I got to say, fickle when it comes to that?
Well, okay, for one thing, I think a lot of the fan base is so uneducated that it creates a lot more divide than there should be.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that are so agenda-driven in terms of how they promote their own media that it creates a divide. I'll talk about another example. Like, Louis Marco was all over Phil at the Olympia, and then the next week with Hottie had the same issue, but yet he was all about Hottie beating Flex. So is it an issue that you're worried about the guts, or is it that you just don't like the champs and you want them to be beat?
Yes.
So I mean, and then you have all 100,000 uneducated followers following this guy, who are then re-replicating what he's saying over and over and over and over. And, why does he have a voice in the first place? I don't know, but he does. And it creates a ripple effect within the whole bodybuilding community.
Right.
And I've never met him, and I don't have an issue with him, but that was just a very real example of something that I could say in terms of how things are so fickle. And it's like, you only got one showing, and if you're bad, you're done, and get out of here.
Right.
Brandon Curry is a great example of that. everybody wrote him off last year. Look how he's done this year.
Right.
But you're right. It's sad. I really wish in a lot of ways that bodybuilding was ran a lot more like the NFL. Even in terms of like the Olympia week, because I wish the Olympia week was ran in reverse, where all the press obligations were at the beginning of the week. They had 2 days to kind of chill and not do anything and then step on stage, much like Super Bowl week is.
Yeah.
I think it would really help the showing and what the guys are bringing to the stage, but that's another talk for another time. But, so there's just so much that goes into it that I don't think that a lot of, I think NFL fans are a lot more educated on the NFL in the grand scheme of things than bodybuilding fans are educated on actually what goes on in bodybuilding.
Yeah. Well, I've talked about this all the time. I think that's the reason we're not a mainstream sport, never will be, because bodybuilding requires a great deal of education in a sense. You need to have an eye for physiques and understand how they're judged to really know what's going on. And most of these people that are making comments and they're on the boards, they really don't, but yet they have a voice.
Right, right.
And those are the voices that we hear, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The loudest.
And even one more thing, just on that note, like the whole Olympia tour, I was on part of it last year. That is the most strenuous, hardest thing I've ever done, and I wasn't even in shape or competing. So for those of you that are listening to this that are so critical of the guys on that tour, possibly coming in off, there's so many variables that they have no control over in terms of food, in terms of jet lag, in terms of different time zones. They're doing the best they can, and they're only given a certain amount of variables to even deal with. We showed up in Spain and the food was good, but there was a lot of things that were missing, so you kind of just have to pick and choose and do the best that you can with what you're given and hope that the food that you bring over isn't taken, through security. So there's so many things that the average fan doesn't even think about that's really going on in terms of why an athlete could be off or they're not at their best, or hey, maybe they just got off a flight and had to step on stage 12 hours later. You just never know.
Yeah. Okay, Matt, I have to talk about this past summer. You had 2 very bad things happen in your life and 1 very good thing. Can you summarize the timeline there? Because I'm not even sure how closely these things all happen together.
Sure. My brother passed away on August 12th. My brother passed away on August the 12th. And then that next week, so that was on a Monday night, Tuesday morning. August the 8th. Yeah. So Monday night, Tuesday morning, that happened. So Tuesday morning we left and headed down to my family, and I was there all week. And then Sunday, I flew down to spend the week with Josh in Dallas at his house. And I was there Sunday through Saturday. We had an awesome week together. I got back home Saturday, spent the day with my wife on Sunday, and then Monday, Tuesday, Dallas passes away, which was extremely hard. I mean, still is very hard on me, in a lot of ways. And then 3 weeks later, my son was born, Jordan and I's first child, and we named him Dallas after Dallas McCarver. And that alone is kind of a cool story because Jordan and I, we didn't know what the sex of our child was going to be. So it was going to be a surprise. So we had the girl's name picked out from day one. And in terms of boy names, we just never really could settle on something. Everything was just kind of oh, yeah, that's okay. But as soon as Dallas passed away, it was just kind of yeah, this is what we're going to do. So, obviously, you can't ever get Dallas back. You can't ever get an athlete like Dallas back. But I mean, it's honestly, it still is very sad. Last night I was just looking through pictures and, I miss them a lot. So if you want to talk anything about anything specific, I'd be happy to. But that's kind of the timeline of the events that happened. So I had 2 deaths within 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks later, my son was born.
Now, I know Dallas was very sudden and unexpected. We were all everybody, I think, when they got the news was like, oh my God, we thought it was just, fake news or something. Can I ask with your brother, was it sudden and unexpected, or was there any?
That was sudden and unexpected as well.
Wow. Gee,
yeah.
I'm sorry, man. What a summer. I don't want you to have to talk too much about Dallas, but most of us just knew. I wasn't lucky enough to really know him as a person. I interviewed him a few times for the magazine and whatnot. I liked him, but I didn't really know the person. You knew the person. What about him do you think people should know that they don't know just looking at these pictures and videos?
Um, I think one of the main things that, like, I when I say this, I mean it, but like that last week that we spent together was the best week that we've ever had. And we've had a lot of good weeks. But, I think one of the things that Dallas would want to be remembered for is how he loved kids. And we actually, his massage therapist just had a baby. And she brought the baby over to the house. I think it was on like Thursday night before he passed away. And he took some pictures with the baby and sent them out to some people. And, that's what, like, Dallas at his happiest was he was around kids. He was just a big kid himself. And he was just, everything that he was doing at that time was exactly what he wanted to do. And I think that's, there couldn't be a better way for somebody to die. I mean, he was chasing his dream, living his life to the fullest, living his life without regrets. And that's how he went, so I think that says a lot.
Yeah.
And also too, I mean, Dallas had the potential, and Dallas is trying to be the best in the world, So I think when you're trying to do those two things, it takes closing other things out. And Dallas, there was a lot of times where Dallas just wanted to be normal. Dallas wanted to go to football games, and Dallas wanted to hang out with friends, but he chose what he chose because he wanted to be the best in the world. So yeah, he missed out on some things, but at the same time, he was living the life that he wanted to live, according to the goals that he had. And I think that's really an awesome way to go, honestly.
Yeah. Because it's a lot of people harp on the fact that it's, missed potential, that he could have been this great champion, which I really believe he would have been. If he wasn't going to be Mr. Olympia, he certainly would have been someone like a Lev Roney or a Flex Wheeler that should have been Mr. Olympia. You know what I mean?
Right.
He certainly had everything physically, and even from what I could tell, just talking to him and watching the videos, mentally and psychologically, he had that drive and that work ethic that I've met so many guys with equal or maybe even better genetics than him that did not have that.
Yeah.
And that's why they sort of fell by the wayside over the years or faded away. But the thing that gets lost here is that this was a 26-year-old kid.
Right.
And that's I have kids. My youngest is only 3 years younger than that. So, I'm going to change the subject.
Yeah.
So let's get back to people were asking on the thread. I asked for people to ask questions, and a lot of people wanted to know about your own competitive aspirations. You competed last year, 2016, right? You won the Flex Wheeler, light heavyweight and overall, correct?
Well, the Flex Lewis is what I won last year.
Flex Wheeler.
Yeah,
Flex
you're good. Yeah, so I won light heavies and overall.
Yeah, and then you went to USA.
Excuse me?
Then you went to the USA's, right?
Yeah, I went to USA's, and I was second call out there, but the call outs were big, so I ended up getting 15th. And USA's wasn't planned at all. Like, at that point, I was in shape. And Dallas was actually the one. He's like, man, just go do it. Just see how you do. So I've been training ever since. My goal is to compete next year. Obviously, I need to requalify, and then I'll either go to USA's or North Americans or both, and then kind of go from there. But my goal is I want to win my pro card.
Yeah.
I would like to do it in the next 3 years. That's kind of the goal that I've set for myself. I'd like to be a pro by the time I'm 31, and then just kind of go from there as far as that goes. But it's really just kind of solidifying, everything that I've worked for is why I want it. I know that I'm not going to be competitive. It was always kind of a joke / goal that Dallas and I had, but he told me, he said, if you turn pro, I'll come back and, take an Olympia show or like, do an extra show. That way we can compete together.
Yeah.
So it's just been a goal of mine, and I don't plan to do anything at the pro level. It's just something I'd like to have on my resume, and just kind of just accomplish a goal of something I've worked so many years for is kind of where I'm at in that. So
you're preaching to the choir, Matt. You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
But
I'll definitely be a heavyweight next year. My peak weight last year, I was 232 before I came down for the flex. I'm about 255 right now. And this is the best shape I've been in my off season. So I'm excited to see what it looks like next year on stage.
So, I think this is valuable because most guys, I don't think you have elite genetics. I don't, you don't look at weights.
Absolutely not.
You don't think about weights and just grow, correct?
Yeah.
So I mean, I find that type of athlete more inspirational, far more inspirational than someone who jumps into their first show after a year of training and blows everybody away, and they're a pro within another year. How much more dedication, how much more work does it take for someone like you to reach that level than it would for someone who was a lot more blessed?
I mean, I don't want to discredit what other people are doing, but I just know, I mean, the reason why I got in with Justin, like I'm going to use Justin as an example. The reason why I got in with Justin initially was because he said he finally found somebody that he could train hard enough with that would push him to the level he needed to be pushed at. So, that's always been a part of who I am, is just to really train as hard as I can train, train as heavy as I can train, and try to really take pride in the reps that I do and in my form and not get sloppy. So I've been that way for a long time. I I train really hard. I'm known for training really hard, and that's just, I mean, I know that if I trained like a lot of the people that I see that are better than me training on Instagram, I would never be anywhere close to where I'm at. And that's not to do, again, it's working for them. I'm not saying anything about it. I'm just saying I see a lot of people training. I'm like, man, if I train like that, I'd be 170 pounds the rest of my life. Like I just would.
Yeah.
So, and that's
does it ever annoy you when people with these very, very gifted genetics don't acknowledge that they have those gifts? They just, I hate sounding like a hater, but I've met people like that they don't really think they have anything special genetically. They're just convinced that they work that much harder than literally everybody else, when I watch them and I can see that that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it annoys me. They might just not really realize what's going on. But I mean, it is what it is, but again, I don't know. I think the reason why I want a pro card so bad is because I've worked so hard. Nothing has come easy, like nothing. So, I wouldn't want it if it came easy. I wouldn't want it if this would have been a 3-year road for me, because obviously I'm not picking a challenge that's hard enough if that's the case. Or if I was that good, then my goal needs to be to be an Olympia contender and not just get a pro card. But I realize for me, a pro card is a huge deal, because that's kind of the end of my road there.
Yeah.
So,
a big topic, obviously, with everything that's happened, not only with Dallas, but at so many other athletes, is that this can be a sport that's not the healthiest sport. What precautions? How do you make sure athletes, or what can we as athletes do? Because a lot of people watching this are in the same boat. What can we do to make this a little healthier for us, or a little less risky, should I say?
I could talk about this for a long time, but I think the main thing is, there are a few main things, is that you need to check your body weight in the off season and not just chase a number on the scale. Because there's a lot of people that don't even lift weights, that are overweight and just eat massive amounts of food that are extremely unhealthy. So it goes beyond just bodybuilding.
Yeah.
So just making sure, there should be health, even though this might not be the healthiest sport, there should be health involved in what you do in terms of your food choices, even when you're trying to grow. Just slamming massive amounts of muffins and burgers and fries all the time to put weight on, that's not the healthiest thing for our bodies in the midst of what we're doing. Making sure you get your blood work done. Even when you're not getting blood work done, making sure that you're donating, because certain things you can be taking could be raising your hematocrit and hemoglobin. So things like that, I think are very, very crucial. Also, if you are going to take different performance-enhancing drugs, make sure you understand what those drugs are doing from a negative standpoint, and not just look at, hey, how am I going to grow tissue off of this, but really look at the negative side effects, understand the negative side effects, understand how to combat those things. That's going to go a long way to keeping you to be able to do this for a long time in terms of your longevity. Not sweeping things under the rug. If you're not feeling good, pay attention to that. Make sure you're checking your blood pressure in the off season. Things like that they're crucial, and there's so many people that don't even understand how to read their own blood work enough to even begin. If this is something that's overwhelming to you, find somebody that understands blood work. Find somebody that can teach you about blood work. Find somebody that can teach you about negative side effects, because it truly can save your life, and it could truly make you enjoy the sport a lot longer if you do things the right way. And also, learn how to train harder. The harder you train, the less you have to take, and therefore you're going to be better in the long run anyway.
That's what I want to get to too. Was I'm a grouchy old man. I'm 48 years old, and I get together with a bunch of other grouchy old men. And all we do is say, these young guys today, they don't want to train hard. They don't want to put the work in. They just want it all to come out of a bottle. And I know that doesn't apply to all the young guys today, but I do seem to see a lot of that attitude where, you know, I'm not going to name names of people who I think sort of got that idea going because, you know, he's I don't hate the kid, but
well, there's a lot more than just one people, but
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I mean, do you see that? Do you see that training just doesn't have the emphasis that it used to and that it should have anymore?
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, like I don't even always fault the competitors. I mean, you could talk about this, but even the gym culture and the gym community has changed. Like if you walk into a gym 20 years ago, it was all free weights and all plate loaded heavy machines, and even even the plate loaded machines are now lighter. You know, if you got on an old flex press versus a new Life Fitness press, I mean, the difference in the load there is tremendous. You know,
Yeah.
so it's like everything is just softened up, and now if a new athlete, if a new bodybuilder walks into a gym, they're inundated with all these pin loaded machines. You know, they're not even like, it's not the culture to go get in the free weight section anymore because of how gyms are set up. You know, so it's a gym culture difference, it's an athlete difference, it's an Instagram difference. Like there's so many different levels of things that are changing what bodybuilding is. Outside of just the obvious work ethic. You know, I mean, obviously the work ethic is the bottom of it, but who is influencing that? It's like it's being influenced at every step of the journey.
Yeah. You know, we could get into specifics on diet and other things, but one thing I thought was interesting was that, I don't know if this is still the case, you're not a proponent of really, really high protein intake. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. You know, and again, I think my protein intake is high. It's just not like to the level of some guys. You know, I feel like for some guys, it's basically just like every middleweight should be on 7 ounces, every light heavy should be on 9 ounces, every heavyweight should be on 10 to 12 ounces, and every super should be on 14 ounces. Like, it's just kind of like a sliding scale.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I try to pay attention to is digestion that people have. You know, and obviously the leaner the individual is, that's when I'll bring protein up a little bit more. But I also, you know, I look at nutrients in terms of the protein values that are in carbohydrates. So if their carbs are high in the off season, they're getting protein there. Obviously, it's an indirect source. Might not be complete protein all the time, but it's still calories. And I just don't really think you need massive amounts of protein. Especially on the topics of gut distension, and gut distension starts in the gut and starts in digestion and then kind of manifests itself from there, you know. And even with, I'm kind of getting on a rabbit trail here, but I think a lot of the gut issues seen on stage right now are poor digestion that's just manifested itself over the load. You know, oftentimes, like if you're putting a lot of fibrous foods in, oats, sweet potatoes, white potato skin, and you're not putting water in, like where do you expect all that insoluble fiber to go? It's just going to sit there. It's not going to move.
Yeah.
So you're getting bulk in the intestine tract, and it's gonna distend.
Yeah.
You know, so that's kind of my take on protein. I base it off on lean body mass. So I take an individual, and let's say if they're 225 and their stage weight is going to be around 197. You know, I'll base their protein off of 1.75 to 1.5 based off of their lean tissue, not off of their fat tissue. So you're still looking at 350, 375 for their protein, which isn't low by any means, you know.
Right.
But I'm also counting what they're getting from their Ezekiel bread and stuff like that. Like it's not just direct meat sources.
Right. Now, do you think on average most bodybuilders do overeat protein?
Yeah, you know, and also protein, I mean, the thermogenic rate of protein is higher. So I understand that argument too, because obviously the more protein you're getting in, the more calories you're going to get in. So therefore there's a satiety effect there. And at the same time, you're going to burn that at a faster rate in terms of, you know, the thermic effect of that food. But at the same time, it's like enough, you know, it's just like if you're taking a supplement, like more isn't always better, you know, just, you know, it's not like the sky is the limit in terms of the benefits, in terms of just positive benefits without starting to get negative benefits from those foods as well.
Yeah. All right, I want to end this on a very positive note. So tell me about what life is like with your new son.
It's a lot of fun. We're not getting a ton of sleep right now,
No.
but I'm really excited, you know, and two, just to kind of go back to why I set an age limit per se on my pro card is because basically if I turn pro by the age of 31, he'll be 3, and then I'll kind of be able to just pull off of my how hard I have to push in order to get to that card, and then I can just kind of enjoy coaching him, you know, taking him to ball games, and it being less about me. It's already a lot less about me than what it was initially, but I want to be able to be very invested in his life, you know, and coach his sports and do all these things. So I won't ever stop training. But, you know, it won't be so competitive for me, because every time I go into the gym, I'm trying to lift new numbers and do things, and I can kind of shut that off and just have the focus be on him. So, you know, everything, as soon as I found out that Jordan was pregnant, you know, my whole thought process on a lot of things had just changed immediately. You know, it's about providing for them. It's about protecting him. And I want to grow him and teach him how to be the man that I want him to be, you know. So that's going to take a lot of time and effort. So something's going to have to give, and if that's bodybuilding, that's what it's going to have to be, because it's not going to be the work aspect. It's not going to be the coaching aspect, because that needs to be there, because that's my career. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, you know, where my thought process and emphasis is right now.
All right. Well, I want to say condolences on the losses you suffered. Congratulations on the blessing that you had with your son. And, you know, you have a strong following. It's getting better all the time, because you are someone who's on the rise, someone who's clearly always learning yourself and passing what you learn on to other people, which is what it should be all about. And, you know, I wish you the very best, Matt.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Cool. So for the Ronline Report, it's been Ron Harris with Matt Jansen.